Welcome to Beyond the Walls podcast. I'm your host, Kylie, and I want to share through personal experience and life lessons learned about personal walls that I have overcome and overcoming still, and to give you hope and tools to go beyond your walls too. Let's get started.
Nobody likes or looks forward to pain, at least not anyone that I know. We spend so many hours worrying about future pain, ways that we can avoid it, or we spend a lot of time dwelling on past pain. But one of the most unproductive things I think we do is focus on the fact that the pain itself, shouldn't have or shouldn't be happening at all. When my son was 4, he ran full speed into a metal gate as we were heading to the car from a full afternoon of swimming. This gate was bright green. It was not hidden in any way. It wasn't large, it just kind of was blocking a lot of grassy area, and it was just covering like one way that a car could drive down. And we were walking on that paved portion where if the gate was open, cars could go down, but because lots of people were around, the gate was closed so that it would prevent cars from coming in. And right before we got to this gate, my son we were walking calmly. He just starts running as fast as he can. I don't know where he thought he was going, but this gate, it had a bar at the bottom and a bar at the top, but in the middle was this huge empty space. And unfortunately, it was right in his eye line. So he was looking beyond the gate to the full open space. Like he couldn't see unless he had looked up or looked down that there was even a gate there. He was just as shocked as I was when he got knocked down to the ground in an instant. He managed to cut his eyebrow, mind you, the same one that he had cut open only a year prior on a coffee table. So I felt like at least this was sort of familiar territory for me. I was like, again, the same eye? Like, what are the odds? So at least I was familiar with what we needed to do. I wasn't as alarmed this time, and we headed straight to the urgent care that I knew could stitch him back up. Unfortunately, though, for him, this time he was a little bit older, so this time he was much more aware of what was going on. He had a lot more strength and a lot more fear of what the doctors were going to do to him. So when it was our turn to be seen by the doctors and the nurses, they had to wrap him up in sheets like a straitjacket. They had my husband on one side and they had me on the other to hold his body down. And they were at his head, obviously, nurses holding his head straight and stiff and still so that the doctor could clean the wound and stitch it back up. They did put numbing cream on his eye, so at least like he wasn't in like the immediate pain, but clearly fully present to all the craziness that's happening around him. He's in complete panic. He's in pain. He's also fearing like what's going to happen, and he is just screaming at the top of his lungs and trying to wriggle his body as much as he can. The three of us are like practically in a full body sweat. Just the intensity to keep him still. And he's looking at us and asking them to make them stop. He's just in complete shock that we're letting these people do this to him. He's got to get out. And so when we didn't stop them from doing it, he proceeds to shout at the top of his lungs, "Help me! Somebody, anybody, help me!" We could laugh about it now, but in the moment, it was so sad. You're just thinking like, oh my gosh, could people hear him out in the waiting room? Like, what do they think is happening in here? And in the moment, we kept trying to reassure him that we were there with him, he was safe, and we're reminding ourselves that, like, it's going to be okay. This is necessary. It's for his good, and it will be over soon. And Of course, as soon as the doctors were done, he's released from the sheets and we're able to comfort him and hug him. And he was quickly and easily calmed down. The fear was gone in an instant. The painful situation was gone. He was happy again and seemed, just unaffected. He was ready to move on and leave that place. He still had a little wound that was going to take time to heal. We still had to keep an eye on him. And there was a little bit of pain upon the touch, but other than that, the big pain situation was over. From that experience, he now has a battle scar that he's going to be able to show people for the rest of his life and tell a funny story later. And we usually relive it every once in a while of the panic asking for help is kind of a funny just anecdote in our household even today. And hopefully he learned a good lesson to be careful and to look about what's ahead in front of you before you take off in a full sprint. But thinking about, that situation now, I'm reminded of my own painful experience during that same season of time between his two stitches, actually. We had just moved shortly before his first incident to a new state, and everything about our lives was different. We went from a small town to big town, low cost of living to high cost of living, kind and welcoming community culture to a busy and guarded culture, a comfortable job for my husband to a high pressure job. I came from lots of friends that were in the same stage of life as me to no close friends and hardly any stay at home moms. We moved 6 times in those 2 years between temporary and semi temporary situations. My daughter switched schools twice. We had an ambulance ride and a hospital stay for my son. And I lost what felt like my whole world. I found myself in a foreign land with no familiar comforts, 2 small kids, and an even more stressed and discouraged marriage. I knew that moving was going to be hard and it was going to be different, but not like this. I felt so lonely. I felt lost and I didn't know where I fit in. I lost all of those outward circumstances where I found my purpose and my identity. Unfortunately, my fears and my husband's fears, the things that were stressing us out just seemed to trigger us even more. And so instead of suffering together, we just pushed each other away. I didn't see a way out. I could barely keep up with the everyday stress that life brings, let alone deal and process the emotional pain and the fears and the hurts that I was grieving. I was grieving what I had lost, but I also was grieving what was happening in the present. I don't remember ever regretting moving because I definitely felt really grateful that it was very intentional. Like I deliberately chose to move there. And so as much as, bitterness and resentment are kind of in my nature at that time, that was one thing. I wasn't upset that we did move. I just was so upset about how it was going. Sometimes our expectations and our reality are just very different. And the pain that I was in during that season was twofold. I think one, it was obvious that I was afraid to address my fears about my own purpose and identity. I had to face myself and look inward, but I couldn't do that until I stopped pointing the finger at everyone else in those circumstances and blaming them for letting me down. And secondly, I had a big decision in front of me to put our time in and get out of there with as few scars and as little impact as possible? Or was I going to invest and embrace the time that we were there? So, with those two examples, I'm sure that they're bringing for you some memories of some painful situations that you've been through in your lifetime or the people around you. Maybe you're going through one right now. Do you remember feeling lost or confused? You didn't know how it would end or when it would end. Maybe you reacted in those circumstances and caused yourself even more pain to yourself or others. I was definitely surprised at how hard that time was. I was also really mad that it was as hard as it was. I was just mad that it was painful at all. I definitely spent several months just pitching a fit that it just should not be this way. I remember shortly around the time that we had the hospital and ambulance situation, which was about 6 months into our move. And our pastor had preached a sermon one Sunday about wilderness times. And I don't remember very many details. I wish I did of that message, but my takeaway that I do remember that was a transformational time for me was that I won't be able to hear God and be willing to see what's being created if I don't stop screaming and holding on to what was. Kind of like how my son was screaming for release. Right in that moment, like he didn't understand the pain that he was currently in, and he certainly didn't understand the pain that would have been caused if we did not take him through that circumstance. Like if we had done what he thought was best in that moment, which was to let him go, for people to stop touching him. But we knew that if we did that, it would lead to infection and a much bigger scar and a bigger wound and complications. It would have created much more pain in the short term and the long term for him. I left church that service and felt like, okay, God, I know you can do something productive with my time here. I had this sense of surrender to just accepting the fact that it is what it is. No amount of screaming in my straitjacket was going to change the fact that I had this big wound in my heart and in my life. And I can't hear anything if I don't stop screaming. So that was my first step. I committed to stop screaming and to be quiet long enough to hear him, long enough to listen, long enough to think, and long enough to be open. And secondly, I committed to stop comparing my current life with what it used to be. I chose to be open to seeing what was right in front of me and to consider not making it wrong because it was different. And I wanted to be willing to see it for what it was, to give myself time to adjust, to build friendships, to face where was my identity and my purpose, and where was it going to come from now? Pain is inevitable. Physical, mental, emotional, like are going to experience all of those things. Everybody will. But pain serves a purpose. There are some things in life that we would never experience if we didn't go through the pain. Pain can produce joy, security, connection, life, purpose, wake-up calls, warnings, protection, and healing. We often want growth, but we don't often want the pain of getting there. There's a phrase I've heard and now believe that says that people who pay attention. Maybe it's paying with money. If you're going to pay for something, you're going to make sure it's worth it or you get the most out of something. There's some skin in the game. Like it matters to you about getting a return on your investment. Maybe it's paying with your time. We will sacrifice for the things that we deem valuable. Maybe it's pain in vulnerability. We won't ever be seen and heard and have the connection we really want if we're too afraid to put ourselves out there. And often, pain does this for us. It pushes us to face our fears, to build our own muscles and confidence that we can overcome, that we are stronger than we think, that we're smarter than we think, we're more valuable than we think, we have more to offer than we think. Pain can produce something even better. Childbirth brings life. Surgery heals and repairs. It can wake us up from apathy and give us aliveness and connection that we're so desperate for. What if instead of spending all of our time avoiding pain, fearing pain, complaining about pain, we just prepared our minds and our spirits about who we want to be in the face of pain? Spend time remembering all the times that you have overcome pain before, the times that pain has brought you healing, life, strength, and joy in the past. Have you been screaming and focusing on just being upset about the pain itself? Are you stuck there? What's holding you back from opening your eyes and your heart to see what is happening around you? Who do you need help from? What action can you take to move towards healing? What is preventing you from the other side of pain? I want you to know that in no way is this to minimize your situations. It is not to bring you more harm to your circumstances, but definitely a hand to comfort you, a listening ear to share with, an offer of support to help you look up and look out from the darkness. Pain is not to be feared or avoided. We can grow and learn and decide who we want to be in the face of pain. And we don't have to go it alone.
Thank you so much for joining me today. If you would like more information about opportunities for coaching or more help outside of the podcast, you can follow us at beyondthewalls.podcast on Instagram or check out our website, beyondthewallspodcast.com. Until next time, bye.